So part 2 of scarcity, which is going to be opposite today. We're going to talk about abundance, which is the opposite of scarcity. My name is Amy. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Hopefully you have been here and you watched part 1 of this where I talked more about scarcity and just being able to see it in yourself, understand it, recognize how it's showing up, ways that it shows up through behaviors. And this week, though, it's a little more exciting because we get to talk about the opposite of that, which is abundance. And I kind of mentioned this in the last one, but this idea that everything comes from one of two places, either love or fear. Everything is rooted in that, including our behaviors, our decisions, our mindsets, all of that. So in our topic today, abundance comes from love. And scarcity is the idea that everything is fixed, that there's a shortage, that there will never be enough. And abundance is the complete opposite of that, that there is enough for everybody, that there is always more than enough. And it's also like this feeling, if you think about it, of just like a fullness, a wholeness. And so I want to just kind of go over some examples of abundance and talk about those, because I feel like there are so many ways you can talk about this topic. But just starting off for this part 2 of really seeing some examples of that, because in order for us to really understand where we still have scarcity, we have to become aware of that. And once we become aware of that, in order to actually do anything to change it, we have to know what we would want to do that's opposite of that, kind of like the positive opposite of whatever that scarcity aspect was. And if you've been here, you've kind of mentioned that scarcity was a huge part of my life growing up, and it shows itself in every single way. But for me, it really showed itself in money. And that is because I learned that was my environment, and that is what my family was taught. That's what their families were taught. And it's become really important to me to break these cycles, which is super hard. But also when you do it, when you start doing it, you realize that it's actually, you're like, oh gosh, the anticipation of this was so much harder, and just kind of figuring out where to start. But once you get started on this, it feels like so attainable. You can do it, you know? So whether this is something that you've been working on or you are just now starting to explore, this will apply. And I feel like it doesn't matter if we have been focused on this forever or not, or how great we feel one day. I just think that any kind of reminder, any kind of refresher is so important for us to kind of maintain where we want to be. So here are I'm going to go through a list of some statements of abundance and ideas of abundance, and kind of touch on some of these just to get an idea, to bring that awareness. And as you are thinking about maybe where you feel scarcity, also thinking about how maybe any of these apply to that positive opposite for you. And if these don't, what that would be for you. So one aspect of abundance is this idea and belief that there will always be enough. And those people when you see them, they have this just kind of like, they're so easygoing. They're never worried about how they're going to do things or get things done or have groceries. And this is not just people who are wealthy. This is a mindset. So these are people, it's not about the amount of money that they have. All of this comes down to a belief, which is translated into an energy and a vibe. And that is what the universe responds to for us. So people that have that idea that there will always be enough have that energy, that wholeness I was talking about. They have this kind of, they're just not really fazed by things because they have so much trust. And that is one of the other things, is just having trust that things are going to work out. And when people have this approach to things, I have always admired it, and I've always noticed it but didn't always understand what it was. And I'm really glad that I'm able to recognize that now and actually see it for what it is. Another aspect of abundance is someone who's really generous with others. And again, that comes down to knowing that there will always be enough. And they also understand that how you give is how you receive. And the more connected you become to this, you also know that when you give, that comes back to you tenfold, especially if you're doing it from a very pure and honest and intentional place. People who have an abundant mindset really believe that the best is yet to come, even if things are really hard. It doesn't mean they don't have hard seasons. It means that they do have hard seasons, but in spite of that, they're not allowing that to dictate how they feel. They know it's going to get better. They know that even when it's hard, there's always something good that can be found within that. Another thing is, they really embrace change because they know that even that is going to work out. They trust that there is a bigger plan. They trust that when these changes happen, that perhaps it is going to be for the better. Even if they can't see it yet, they're not trying to control or micromanage. They're just trusting that it's all going to be okay. Another aspect of abundance mindset is seeing things with glass half full. And this kind of applies to everything I've already said. And just always being able to see the positive side of something and approaching things through a lens of love versus fear. They also know that money flows easily to them when they're coming from this place. So when you're thinking about like the law of attraction or manifesting or anything in that realm, we get what we focus on. So if you are focusing on a lack of what you have and your energy is very stressed about how you're going to pay your bills and how you're going to get ahead or what you don't have, unfortunately, you're attracting more of that because that's what you're focused on. That's where your energy is going and your emotions. So people with an abundance mindset know that money's always going to flow back to them. And even this, I know people will write checks and just say thank you. They'll find appreciation in that with the idea of knowing that when it goes out, it's going to come back. And I think that is really admirable and definitely something that I have worked on myself of just shifting when I am paying any bills, especially those that come up unexpectedly, just really recognizing the emotional reaction that I historically have had and realizing that that is this learned idea and behavior of scarcity that I actually don't need to have. I don't need to feel. I feel it because it's always how I've felt, but I don't have to be scared. I don't have to be threatened. I don't have to feel like, oh my gosh, how, like with just this overwhelm. I can have this idea of trust, just like, okay, I have to pay this and I'm going to trust that it's going to work out, because ultimately these things work out the same way, whether we feel really worried about them or whether we trust the process. And oftentimes they work out even better when we trust the process. So it's just so important to be able to kind of go inward and recognize that the reaction that we have to things, which is either that scarcity or abundance, is ours, and it actually has nothing to do with what's happening. It's our own personal experience that can be shifted because the things going on outside of us are going to happen no matter what. Another really important one is seeing others who have things that you want, and rather than feeling jealous, you see what's possible. I did talk about this one in the last video. This is huge for me. It's a part of meditations that I work on, and I just feel like this has been such a great shift for me to be able to see possibility, and not just with people, but seeing a big, beautiful home, seeing a car I love, seeing anything like that, hearing about a trip somebody went on, experiences that people have, being able to pay that unexpected bill with cash and not really think anything of it. when I hear about this or see this, it's a possibility for me. It expands me. It allows me to see what's possible. And one of the reasons why it is so hard to break the scarcity cycle is because most of us who have that don't have other people around us showing us what's possible, which is why it's so hard. And that's why we're there. And that's why that cycle hasn't been broken. So shifting that way you feel inside when you see someone from jealousy to abundance is the only thing that's being changed in that is actually your response to it. It's not changing the other person's experience. They don't even know how you're feeling about it. They don't feel threatened the way you might. And so just being able to say, what if I recognize, okay, this feeling's coming up for me, but rather than interpreting it as this idea that now I can't have it because they do, seeing it as this gives me an idea of what I can actually strive for, a goal that I can put down, a desire that I can put on my desire list to know that that is attainable for me. I think that one is super powerful. And another aspect is just, a lot of scarcity comes up in money. And like I said, that's where it was for me. So although it came up in every aspect of my life, especially before I was so aware of it, it was most obvious around money. And it's this idea, people who have that abundance mindset, is just knowing that they can afford it and saying that and believing it. Abundance is very much about believing that what you want in the future and your desires are already happening. They're already on their way to you. And so knowing you can afford it, maybe you're not buying it today, but you can afford it. And you are taking all the actions you need to take to get to that place of affording it. And I just, this has been a huge thing for me in my life, and I've had to do so much work around this. And I really think that the more we hear it, the more we hear other people's experiences and share with one another, the people who, create those safe spaces for us to share and be vulnerable, who are also working on it, it makes such a difference. And it allows us to really grow and have that mirror back on us. That's the other thing about seeing people who have what we want, or whose behavior brings any of these emotions out, is that those are mirrors for us. They are showing us a reflection of ourselves. It has nothing to do with other people. Those are opportunities for us to see, oh, I love what they're doing. I love that behavior. I love that approach. Or, oh, I don't like that. Where am I showing up at behaving that way too? I don't really like that, so I don't want to approach things that way. And just being able to see that, maybe we see scarcity in other people. Oftentimes it's so much easier to see scarcity or abundance in another person. We don't always see it in ourselves, because I know for me, I'd say, well, I don't do it that way, so obviously I probably just don't do it. But I was doing it in my own version. It just showed up differently. So when we see these things in people and it triggers an emotional reaction in us, whether what we're seeing we like or don't like, that's an opportunity for us to see something in ourselves. And sometimes that can be really hard to do, because that requires humility, and sometimes our ego is like, no, I don't want to look at that. But so much of our growth actually comes from that place of humility, from that place of saying, okay, I see this, I feel this emotion is an indicator to me that something about my thoughts on this are out of alignment with my highest self. And that's something I've really been focusing on lately, personally, of just really going through my days and recognizing where my thoughts are not in the highest alignment, and having so much faith and trust in abundance. And, the worst that happens, I guess, if you really apply this to your life, is that it only gets a little bit better, But if you're trying to incorporate more of something that's really good, it can only get better. And oftentimes by making those little efforts, it leads to so much more than we even had on our radar. And that's why digging in and kind of doing some of this is so important, because you know, I mean, my life has totally changed since I started thinking and looking at all of this. And so much of what's been significant to my progress and really stripping away what wasn't me and becoming aligning the most to my most authentic self has been about, it's really been about for me, you know, seeing back this mirror and seeing the aspects of myself that were just not in alignment with who I knew I really was at my core. So, you know, this is just such an important topic, and this is this idea that like how we do one thing is how we do everything. Even if scarcity or abundance seem a little bit easier in one place than they are in another for you, if you are focused on those areas, other areas that don't seem like such a big deal are also going to start to feel better. And it's going to affect every part of your life without you having to actively focus on every part of your life. And so I hope that you got something from this. If you did, please consider subscribing to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and leave any comments or questions in the comment section below, and I will talk to you next time.